The storm wasn't supposed to arrive until midnight, at least that's what every forecast insisted, but by the time Daniel and I reached the highest stretch of Black Ridge Pass, the sky had already collapsed into a solid wall of white. Snow didn't fall gently, it attacked, slamming into the windshield in thick waves that erased the road behind us like we'd never been there at all. 1 second we could see the lines on the pavement, the next there was nothing but swirling white chaos. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the SUV began to drift slightly with the wind, and then without warning, the engine coughed twice and died. Just like that. Silence swallowed us, broken only by the violent scream of wind tearing across the mountains. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere, and the road that brought us here had already disappeared. We tried everything. Daniel turned the key again and again until the battery weakened into hollow clicking. I pulled out my phone, already knowing what I'd see. No signal. Not even a flicker. The heater faded, and the warmth drained from the vehicle fast, replaced by a creeping cold that felt almost alive. Frost began forming along the edges of the windows while our breath fogged the air between us. That's when Daniel spotted it through the storm, a shape barely visible through the whiteout. A cabin. Sitting alone off the roadside like it had been waiting. No lights. No smoke. Just a dark outline in the snow. It felt wrong to move toward it. But staying meant freezing to death. The walk to the cabin was brutal. Snow reached our knees and wind shoved us sideways with every step. By the time we reached the door, my face felt numb and my hands burned from the cold. Daniel knocked once. No answer. He pushed the door open slowly, and it creaked like it hadn't been used in years. Inside, the air was cold but still, protected from the storm. A stone fireplace sat against the far wall, and old wooden furniture was arranged neatly. As if someone had left only hours ago. That's when I noticed the coat hanging near the entrance. I reached out and touched it. It was warm. We hadn't even processed the warm coat when Daniel called me into the hallway. Bare footprints were pressed into a thin layer of frost across the wooden floor. They led away from the fireplace, down the narrow hallway, and then stopped. No door. No turn. No explanation. Just gone mid-step. My stomach tightened as I stared at them, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe the frost had melted where someone stood. Maybe there was a trapdoor. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The wind outside howled louder, as if reacting to our silence that we managed to start a small fire, and for a moment the warmth almost convinced me everything would be okay. Then the knocking started. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the cabin door. Not frantic. Not desperate. Calm. Controlled. Daniel and I locked eyes, both of us thinking the same thing, there was no way anyone else was out there. The knocking came again. 3 times. Then the handle turned slightly, testing the door. Whoever was outside wasn't freezing. They were patient. Daniel opened the door before I could stop him. A tall, thin man stood there in the storm like it didn't touch him. Snow blew around him violently, yet none of it clung to his clothes. He looked pale, not sickly, just drained. His eyes were lighter than anything I'd ever seen. He introduced himself as Elias and said he'd been staying in the cabin for weeks. Waiting out winter. His voice was calm, almost detached. When he stepped inside, the room felt noticeably colder. Elias spoke quietly, telling us the mountain wasn't like other places. That storms here weren't accidents. That sometimes people weren't allowed to leave. Daniel tried to joke about it, but Elias didn't smile. He just stared into the fire and said, "You'd be surprised what keeps a body going." I noticed something unsettling, despite walking through a blizzard without a coat, his clothes were completely dry. Not damp. Not frozen. Dry. Later that night, I looked out the window and saw something near the tree line. A silhouette standing still against the storm. I blinked, and it seemed closer. My pulse quickened. I turned around to wake Daniel, but Elias was gone. The front door was slightly open, and snow drifted quietly across the floorboards. Whatever I saw outside, it wasn't alone. Then I heard Daniel's voice outside the cabin, calling my name through the storm. Clear. Familiar. But Daniel was still asleep in the chair behind me. The voice came again, softer now, closer to the door. My skin crawled as Daniel woke up and heard it too. It sounded exactly like him. Perfectly replicated. We didn't open the door. Elias returned before dawn without explanation. When Daniel demanded answers, Elias simply said, "It tests you first." He explained that the mountain watches. That it imitates. That it waits for you to make a mistake. I asked him what it was, and he looked at me for a long moment before saying, "You've already met it." The first time I truly doubted Elias was when he smiled. It stretched slightly too wide, not exaggerated, not monstrous, just wrong enough to feel unnatural. And his teeth, they seemed too even. Too many. It lasted only a second, but I couldn't unsee it up by midday. Frost crept across the inside of the windows. The fire burned strong, yet the room felt like a freezer. My breath fogged the air. Daniel's did too. Elias didn't. He stood perfectly still in the center of the room while the temperature dropped around him. Elias told us the rules calmly, like they were survival basics. Don't answer if you hear your own voice outside. Don't look into the trees after sunset. And never let it separate you. His tone wasn't dramatic. It was factual. Like he'd seen what happens. Daniel vanished just after sunset. 1 second he was beside me. The next, the door was open and snow poured inside. I ran outside and saw 2 sets of footprints leading into the storm, one barefoot. One booted. An hour later, Daniel returned. Pale. Shivering. Saying he got lost. But something in his eyes was different. Slower. Watching. When I asked him about a private argument we had earlier that day, he hesitated too long. Elias pulled me aside and whispered, "It replaced him." I felt my chest tighten. Then he added something worse. I was replaced first. His expression didn't change when he said it. On the 4th day, the storm finally weakened. Sunlight reflected off the untouched snow outside. The road might be drivable again. I looked at Daniel. I looked at Elias. I didn't know who, or what, either of them truly were anymore. They attacked each other without warning. Limbs bent at angles that shouldn't exist. Skin stretched over shifting bone. Their voices overlapped, both screaming my name in distorted harmony. Neither of them looked fully human anymore. When it ended, 2 identical versions of Daniel stood in the snow. Both begging me to believe them. Both remembering things only he would know. But only one cast a shadow across the snow that I drove down the mountain alone. Or at least I thought I did. The storm was gone. The road was clear. But in the rearview mirror, I kept seeing pale eyes watching me from the back seat. And when I finally looked at my reflection, my smile stretched just a little too wide.